The forest keeps what it takes. At least that's what they told Tom Clarke when the search for his 8-year-old daughter was abandoned in 1993. For 8 years, he lived with the hollow certainty that his brother Scott had lied about that day, about the hike, about the missing camera. While his marriage crumbled, and the town's sympathy hardened into indifference, Tom preserved Lily's room like a shrine to possibilities, mapping every inch of Pinewood Forest on his apartment walls. People called it obsession, madness even. Until that rainy afternoon in 2001, when his fingers brushed against something plastic, buried beneath the forest floor, something yellow and forgotten, something impossible. As he held his daughter's mud-caked disposable camera, Tom realized that the forest doesn't just keep what it takes. Sometimes it reveals just enough truth to tear a family's carefully constructed lies apart. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning dew still clung to the grass as Tom Clarke hauled the last of their camping gear from the trunk of their station wagon. His wife Elaine was busy organizing their supplies, while their 8-year-old daughter Lily bounced excitedly around the campsite, her blonde pigtails swinging with each step. "Uncle Scott, look what Dad got me." Lily's voice rang through the clearing as she waved a small yellow disposable camera. Her Uncle Scott, who had just emerged from setting up his own tent, flashed a broad smile. "That's awesome, Squirt. You gonna be our official photographer this weekend?" Scott ruffled Lily's hair as she nodded enthusiastically. Tom watched the interaction with a slight frown before forcing a smile. "Remember what I said, Lilypad. 24 shots, so make them count." "I know, Dad. I'm going to capture everything." Lily spun around, already framing the forest through her imaginary viewfinder. The Clarkes had been planning this camping trip for months. Tom had finally gotten time off from his accounting job, and Scott had suggested they visit Pinewood National Forest, a place he claimed to know well from previous hiking trips. The family rarely spent time with Scott, Tom's younger brother by 5 years. There had always been something unsettling about him that Tom couldn't quite place. "Hey, Tom, need help with that tent?" Scott approached, offering a hand. "I've got it," Tom replied, his tone slightly cooler than intended. He caught Elaine's questioning glance and softened. "But you could help Lily collect some kindling for tonight's fire." Scott's smile never faltered. "Come on, photographer. Let's go find some wood." As they walked toward the edge of the clearing, Tom called out, "Don't go far, stay where we can see you." "Relax, big brother." "I've got her," Scott called back, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. Tom noticed how Lily briefly stiffened at the touch before continuing to walk alongside her uncle. The day progressed with typical camping activities, setting up the site, exploring the nearby trails, and roasting hot dogs for lunch. Lily clicked away with her camera, capturing her parents laughing, Uncle Scott telling stories by the fire pit, and the beautiful forest surrounding them. During lunch, Elaine noticed Scott watching Lily as she wandered around taking photos. "She's really taken to that camera," Elaine commented. Scott nodded, his eyes not leaving the child. "She's got a good eye. Reminds me of when Tom and I were kids." "You never took pictures," Tom interjected, handing Scott a soda. "No, but I was observant," Scott replied with a smirk. "I noticed things others missed." An uncomfortable silence fell over the adults, broken only by the click of Lily's camera as she captured a butterfly on a nearby bush. Later that afternoon, Scott offered to teach Lily about identifying edible plants. Tom reluctantly agreed but insisted they stay within sight of the camp. As the day waned, Tom caught glimpses of Scott leaning too close to Lily as he pointed out various plants, his hand lingering on her back longer than necessary. "Tom," Elaine whispered as she noticed her husband's gaze. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he replied, but his eyes remained fixed on his brother and daughter, just making sure they're safe. That night, after roasting marshmallows and telling tame ghost stories around the campfire, the family retired to their tents, Tom and Elaine in the larger family tent with Lily, and Scott in his smaller one nearby. In the early hours of the morning, Tom was awakened by Lily tugging at his sleeping bag. "Daddy," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I heard something outside." Tom rubbed his eyes. "What did you hear, honey?" Like someone walking around our tent, she replied, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. Tom listened, but heard only the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. Probably just an animal, sweetheart. Maybe a raccoon looking for food. It didn't sound like an animal, Lily insisted. It sounded like footsteps. Elaine stirred beside them. What's wrong? Lily heard something outside, Tom explained, already unzipping his sleeping bag. I'll check it out. He stepped outside with his flashlight, sweeping the beam around the campsite. Scott's tent was zipped up tight. There were no obvious footprints in the dirt around their tent, and the forest was quiet. Nothing out there, Lilypad, Tom reassured her when he returned. Just the wind playing tricks. Lily eventually fell back asleep between her parents, but Tom remained awake, listening intently to every sound from the forest around them. The tavern. Next morning, Lily was eager to continue her photography expedition. She'd already used half the film, documenting everything from their breakfast to a spider web glistening with dew. Scott, would you mind watching Lily for a bit? Elaine asked, as she and Tom prepared to gather more firewood. We need to restock before tonight. I'd be happy to, Scott replied. How about it, Squirt? Want to go exploring with your uncle? Lily hesitated, glancing at her father. Tom noticed her reluctance, but didn't want to seem paranoid in front of Elaine. Go ahead, Lily. Just stay on the marked trails and be back in an hour, Tom instructed, checking his watch. And make sure you take plenty of pictures for us. Scott and Lily set off down one of the easier hiking trails, Lily's camera hanging around her neck. Tom watched them until they disappeared around a bend, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. 90 minutes later, Tom was pacing the campsite. They should have been back by now, he said to Elaine, who was trying to maintain her calm. Scott, probably just lost track of time, she reasoned. You know how he gets when he's telling his stories. I'm going to look for them, Tom decided, grabbing his jacket. Just as he was about to leave, Scott emerged from the trail alone, his expression grave. Where's Lily? Tom demanded, his heart suddenly hammering in his chest. Scott's face was pale. She was right behind me. We were heading back and she said she wanted to take a picture of some wildflowers. I told her to hurry up. When I looked back, she was gone. His voice cracked. I searched for her, Tom. I called her name. She must have run ahead or taken a wrong turn. The next few hours were chaos. Tom and Elaine screamed Lily's name until their voices were hoarse. Park rangers were called in, and a search party was quickly organized. By nightfall, dozens of volunteers were combing the forest with flashlights and search dogs. What exactly happened, Mr. Clarke? Ranger Roy Peterson asked Scott as they stood at the ranger station, maps spread out before them. Like I told everyone, she was taking pictures, then she wasn't there, Scott explained, running a hand through his hair. Kids wander off sometimes, right? She'll turn up. But the confidence in Scott's voice didn't match the darting of his eyes or the way his fingers tapped nervously against his thigh. Days turned into weeks. The search area expanded, but no trace of Lily was found. The media descended on the small town near Pinewood National Forest, plastering Lily's smiling face across television screens nationwide. What about the camera? Tom asked one evening. As he and Elaine sat in their hotel room, which had become their temporary home during the search, did they develop the photos? Maybe there's something there. Scott said she lost it during their hike, Elaine replied, her voice hollow. Just before she disappeared. Tom's eyes narrowed. That's convenient. The investigation continued, with Scott undergoing multiple interviews. His story remained consistent, though details seemed to shift slightly with each telling. Without evidence to suggest foul play, Scott was eventually cleared of suspicion. 3 months after Lily's disappearance, with no new leads, the active search was officially suspended. Lily Clarke was presumed dead, likely from exposure or a fall in the rugged forest terrain. The tragedy tore at the fabric of the Clarke family. Tom refused to accept the official conclusion, becoming increasingly convinced that Scott knew more than he was saying. Elaine couldn't bear Tom's obsession and growing paranoia. Within a year they had divorced, each carrying their grief in different directions. And somewhere in Pinewood Forest, buried under leaves and dirt, a small yellow disposable camera lay forgotten, its secrets locked in undeveloped film. Tom Clarke's apartment walls were covered with maps, newspaper clippings and photographs. 8 years had passed, but time seemed frozen in this small one-bedroom space. Lily's face smiled from every direction, school pictures, birthday parties, and candid moments preserved like insects in amber. The room smelled of coffee and neglect. Tom hadn't shaved in days, his once neat appearance now as disheveled as his life had become. After losing his accounting job 3 years ago, too many unexplained absences, too many breakdowns in client meetings, he worked night shifts at a warehouse, leaving his days free to pursue the only thing that mattered, finding the truth about what happened to his daughter. He pinned another article to the wall, this one about a child who had survived 10 days lost in mountains, 2 states, over. Every such story fueled his conviction that Lily could have survived, that the official narrative was wrong. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. "Tom, it's Roy." Roy Peterson had been the lead ranger during Lily's disappearance. Though retired now, he remained the only person from that time who still took Tom's theories seriously. "I've been looking into those hiking records you asked about," Roy continued. "Found something interesting. There was another group camping, about 2 miles from your site that weekend. They reported seeing a man alone off-trail. Didn't think much of it at the time." Tom's pulse quickened. "Did they describe him?" "Not in detail, just said he seemed to be searching for something." Roy paused. "Could have been anyone, Tom." "Or it could have been Scott," Tom replied, his voice hardening at his brother's name. After hanging up, Tom opened his scrapbook, a detailed timeline of events surrounding Lily's disappearance. 3 years ago, he had received an anonymous letter. Its words burned into his memory. "You looked in the wrong direction." No return address, no signature, just those 7 words that had reignited his search. Meanwhile, in a suburb 30 miles away, Elaine Turner, formerly Clarke, was preparing dinner with her new husband, David. Her home was warm and inviting, with no visible reminders of her past life. She had worked hard to rebuild after Lily, throwing herself into her career as a school counselor, and eventually finding comfort with David, a kind man who knew when not to ask questions. But the memories still came, especially at night. The guilt of not listening when Lily said she was uncomfortable around Scott. The memory of catching him once, standing in the doorway of Lily's bedroom, watching her sleep when he thought no one would notice. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. She opened it to find a delivery man with a small package. "Mrs. Turner?" he asked, holding out a clipboard. Inside the package was a newspaper clipping about local folklore, specifically stories of a woods girl seen running through Pinewood Forest. The article mentioned sightings of a child in a teal and purple jacket, the exact colors of the jacket Lily had been wearing when she disappeared. There was no note, but Elaine knew it was from Tom. He sent these periodically. Despite her pleas for him to stop, she crumpled the article and threw it away, hands shaking. David found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly ahead. "Tom again?" he asked gently. Elaine nodded. "He won't let go. And sometimes, I wonder if he's right." Across town, Scott Clarke adjusted his whistle as his middle school basketball team ran drills on the court. His life had taken a different path after Lily's disappearance. He'd moved 3 hours away, changed careers from sales to teaching, and built a reputation as the friendly, dedicated coach who volunteered extra hours and organized summer camps. No one here knew about his niece or the cloud of suspicion that had briefly hovered over him. His charming smile and easygoing manner ensured no one asked too many questions about his past. After practice, Scott checked his mailbox at the school office. Among the usual papers was a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph, a group shot from the camping trip 8 years ago. Scott stared at it, his face paling slightly. In the image, Lily stood beside her parents, smiling brightly. Scott stood slightly behind her, his hand just visible on her shoulder, his eyes fixed on her rather than the camera. He quickly shoved the photo back into the envelope, looking around nervously as if someone might have seen it. That same evening, Tom received a call from Martha Pearson, a former neighbor who had been close to Elaine before the divorce. "I was going through some old boxes," Martha explained, "and found a photo from your camping trip. Thought you might want it for your collection." Tom thanked her and asked her to mail it. When the photo arrived days later, he studied it with growing unease. He had seen plenty of pictures from that weekend, but this one, taken by another camper they'd briefly met, showed something disturbing. In the background, partially obscured by trees, Scott stood watching Lily as she played near the campfire. His posture, the tilt of his head, the intensity of his gaze, it all seemed predatory now with the benefit of hindsight. Tom's hands trembled as he added the photo to his wall. How had he missed the signs? The way Lily had hesitated to go with Scott that morning, her mention of noises outside the tent, the convenient story about a lost camera. He picked up the phone and dialed Elaine's number. "We need to talk," he said when she answered. "I have a new photo from the trip." "Tom, please," Elaine sighed. "It's been 8 years. I can't keep doing this." He was watching her, Elaine, all weekend. "This photo proves it." "You're seeing what you want to see," she replied, but her voice wavered. "Even if Scott was inappropriate, that doesn't mean—" He hurt her. Then why lie about the camera? Why all the inconsistencies in his story? After hanging up, Tom made a decision. He packed a bag with essentials, the photo, maps, the anonymous letter, and camping gear. 8 years of theories and dead ends had led to nothing. It was time to return to where it all began. The drive to Pinewood Forest took nearly 4 hours. Fall was settling in, painting the landscape in golds and reds, much like it had been during that fateful weekend in 1993. Tom parked at the same campground, paying for a week's stay. The ranger at the entrance was new, too young to remember the search for a missing girl years ago. Tom set up his tent in the exact spot they had camped before, meticulously recreating the layout. He unfolded his maps, marking the trails Scott claimed to have taken with Lily. Something had never added up about his brother's story, about how a child could vanish so completely in an area that had been searched so thoroughly. As night fell, Tom sat by his small fire, memories washing over him. Lily's laughter, the click of her camera, her voice calling Daddy when she was excited about a new discovery. He woke at dawn, determined to walk every inch of the area. The morning fog hung low between the trees as he followed the main trail, then branched off to explore areas that might have been overlooked during the original search. Hours passed as he methodically covered ground, making notes on his map. In the late afternoon, a light rain began to fall. Tom was about to head back to camp when something caught his eye. A glint of yellow among the leaves and dirt near the base of a large oak tree. He knelt down, brushing away years of forest debris, and his heart stopped. There, partially buried in the earth, was a small disposable camera, its yellow plastic faded and dirty, but unmistakable. Tom's hands shook as he carefully extracted it from the soil. The camera was weathered, its exterior rusted in spots, but it seemed remarkably intact considering it had been exposed to the elements for 8 years. Could this be Lily's camera, the one Scott claimed she had lost? He wrapped it carefully in his handkerchief and hurried back to his campsite, barely noticing the rain that had begun to fall more heavily. His mind raced with possibilities. If this was Lily's camera, and if the film inside was somehow preserved, it might hold clues to what really happened that day. The wipers of Tom's sedan slapped rhythmically against the windshield as he drove through the rain toward town. The small yellow camera sat on the passenger seat, wrapped in his handkerchief like a fragile treasure. Every few seconds his eyes darted to it, as if afraid it might disappear. Pinewood was a small town that served as a gateway to the national forest. Its main street consisted of a handful of shops, a diner, and various outdoor supply stores catering to hikers and campers. Tom pulled up in front of Thompson's Photo Lab, one of the few remaining places that still developed film in an increasingly digital world. The bell above the door jingled as Tom entered, water dripping from his jacket. Behind the counter, a middle-aged man with thick glasses looked up from a magazine. "Help you?" he asked. Tom carefully placed the camera on the counter. "I need to know if you can develop the film in this." The technician, whose name tag read Frank, picked up the camera and examined it with practiced hands. His eyebrows rose as he noted its condition. "Where'd you find this relic?" he asked, turning it over. "In the forest," Tom replied, not wanting to elaborate. "It's been out there a long time," Frank frowned. I'll be straight with you. Film this old, exposed to the elements? Chances are slim we'll get anything usable. He looked up at Tom, noting the intensity in his eyes. But we can try. How long will it take? Tom asked. Usually a day, but I've got a backlog, 3 days minimum. Tom nodded, filling out the order form with shaking hands. He paid extra for rush processing and headed to the motel across the street. For 3 days he barely slept, alternating between pacing his small room and driving back to the forest to search the area where he'd found the camera. On the 3rd day, Frank called. "You might want to come in," was all he said. Tom practically ran to the photo lab. Frank was waiting, a large envelope in his hands and an odd expression on his face. "Got lucky," Frank said as Tom entered. "About 15 exposures survived, which is a miracle considering the condition of that camera." He hesitated before handing over the envelope. "I've been doing this job 30 years. Never seen anything quite like these." Tom took the envelope and found a quiet corner of the shop to examine the contents. The first several photos were exactly what he expected. Lily's amateur snapshots of their campsite, her mother preparing food, Tom setting up the tent. His heart ached seeing these moments frozen in time, his daughter's perspective captured, just before everything fell apart. Then he reached the last 3 photos and his blood ran cold. The first showed Lily's terrified face, partially illuminated as if by flashlight. She was inside what appeared to be a hollow tree, her eyes wide with fear. The second was blurrier but clearly showed Lily's face again, tear-streaked and dirty. The third photo showed only a shadow approaching, a human silhouette stretching, across forest ground. Tom's hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped the photos. These images weren't from their camping trip, at least not from the part of the trip before Lily disappeared. These were taken afterward. Lily had been alive, hiding after Scott claimed she had vanished. He fumbled for his phone and dialed Roy's number. "I found it, Roy," he said, his voice breaking. "Lily's camera. She was alive. She took pictures after she disappeared." Roy arrived, in Pinewood the next morning. They spread the photos across Tom's motel bed, studying each one carefully. "Look at the timestamp." Roy pointed to the barely visible date printed in the corner of the photos. "This was taken nearly 6 hours after Scott said she disappeared. She was hiding," Tom whispered, "from him." The revelation galvanized them into action. With the photos as evidence, they returned to the forest, focusing on areas with hollow trees large enough for a child to hide in. The search took them deeper into the woods than the original parties had gone, following a path that a frightened child might have taken. Tom felt a desperate need to show the photos to Elaine, to prove he hadn't been crazy all these years. He drove to her house the next day, photos in hand. Elaine opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. "Tom, I told you." He held up the envelope. "I found her camera, Elaine, in the forest. She was alive after Scott said she was gone." Inside, Tom spread the photos on Elaine's kitchen table. David stood nearby, watching with concerned confusion as Elaine's face drained of color. "Oh my God," she whispered, touching the image of Lily in the hollow tree. "She was hiding." "Why didn't you tell me?" Tom asked, his voice breaking. "About Scott watching her sleep." Elaine's head snapped up. "How did you know about that?" "You mentioned it once right after she disappeared. You caught him in her doorway." Elaine sank into a chair. "I convinced myself it was nothing, that he was just checking on her." She covered her face with her hands. "I should have said something." With Elaine finally acknowledging her own suspicions, Tom felt validated after years of being dismissed as paranoid. Together, they contacted the local police, who were initially reluctant to reopen such an old case, based on newly discovered photographs. However, Roy's former position as a park ranger lent credibility to their claim. Tom and Roy returned to the forest, this time with a renewed purpose. Using the photos as guides, they focused on a section of the woods where large, hollow trees were common. On their second day of searching, they found it, a massive oak with a hollow large enough for a child to hide in. "This is it," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper as he compared the tree to the photo. "This is where she was hiding." Roy shined his flashlight into the hollow. The beam caught something small and colorful tucked into a crevice near the queue bottom, a faded friendship bracelet, the kind children made at summer camps. Tom recognized the pattern immediately. He had watched Lily make it the week before their camping trip. Next to the bracelet was a small scrap of fabric, teal with purple trim, the same colors as Lily's jacket. Tom sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the evidence that his daughter had been here, alive, after everyone had stopped looking for her. The official story, that Lily had wandered off and succumbed to the elements, was unraveling. She had been hiding, taking photos, leaving evidence of her survival, which meant someone had been hunting her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Tom clutched the bracelet and fabric scrap in his hand. For 8 years he had lived with the pain of not knowing what happened to his daughter. Now, with Lily's camera providing its silent testimony, he was one step closer to the truth. And somewhere, perhaps Scott was about to discover that his secrets, buried for 8 years like the camera in the dirt, were finally coming to light. Tom stared at the frayed friendship bracelet in his palm, its faded threads a tangible connection to Lily. The evening shadows grew longer as he and Roy made their way back through the forest. The weight of their discovery hung between them like a physical presence. "We need to handle this carefully," Roy said, breaking the silence. "Scott's had 8 years to cover his tracks." Tom nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I want the police involved now. These photos, the bracelet, the fabric, it's all evidence." Back in town, Detective Laura Wilson listened intently as Tom and Roy presented their findings. In her 15 years on the force, she'd seen cold cases reopened, but rarely with such compelling new evidence. The timestamps on these photos directly contradict your brother's statement, she confirmed, examining the images. "And you're certain this bracelet belonged to your daughter?" "Positive," Tom replied. "Lily made it herself. She was wearing it that weekend." Detective Wilson nodded. "I'll assign a team to thoroughly search the area around that hollow tree. In the meantime, I suggest you don't approach your brother. If he gets wind of this development, he'll run," Tom finished, the realization hitting him hard. Scott would disappear just like Lily had. That evening, Tom checked into a different motel, paranoia creeping in as he wondered if Scott somehow knew about the camera already. His phone rang just after midnight. "Tom, it's Elaine." Her voice was tight with emotion. "I did something impulsive." Tom sat up, instantly alert. "What happened?" "I called Scott. Asked him to meet me for dinner tomorrow." She paused. "I didn't mention the camera or anything else. Just said I've been thinking about Lily lately and wanted to reconnect with family." "Elaine," the detective specifically said not to approach him. "I know," she cut him off, "but I need to look him in the eyes, Tom. I need to see his face when I ask him about that day again." Tom ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. "The police won't like this." "Then don't tell them yet," Elaine replied. "Give me this chance. I've spent 8 years trying to move forward, telling myself it was a tragic accident. If Scott, her voice broke, if he did something to our little girl, I need to know." The next evening, Elaine sat across from Scott at Madison's, a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town. He looked older than she remembered, his once boyish features now sharper, his hair beginning to recede. But his smile was the same, that disarming charm that had always made people trust him. "It's good to see you, Elaine," Scott said, raising his wine glass in a small toast. "You look well." "Life goes on, doesn't it?" she replied, studying his face, "even when you don't want it to." Something flickered in Scott's eyes, discomfort, perhaps even guilt, but it was gone so quickly she couldn't be sure. "How's Tom?" Scott asked, clearly trying to shift the conversation. "Still looking for answers," Elaine said carefully, watching for his reaction. "He never really accepted what happened." Scott's fingers tightened slightly around his glass. "It was a horrible accident. We all wish things had been different that day." "Tell me about that day again," Elaine said, her voice soft but insistent. "About your hike with Lily." Scott's smile faltered for a moment. "Elaine, it's been 8 years. Why revisit the most painful day of our lives?" "Humor me," she pressed. "Sometimes I think if I understand exactly what happened, I might finally find some peace." Scott recounted the familiar story, the nature hike, Lily running ahead, her sudden disappearance. But Elaine noticed new details creeping in, subtle changes to a narrative that should have been fixed in his memory. "And the camera?" she asked innocently. "The one Tom gave her that weekend. Did she have it with her when she disappeared?" Scott hesitated, just a fraction too long. "Yes, I think so. She was taking pictures of everything, wasn't she?" He laughed nervously. "Little shutterbug." "But you told the Rangers she lost it earlier that day," Elaine said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Before she disappeared." Scott's face paled slightly. "Did I? It was such a confusing time. Maybe I misremembered." As they parted ways after dinner, Scott hugged Elaine awkwardly. "Let's not wait another 8 years, okay?" he said with a forced cheerfulness that didn't reach his eyes. Elaine watched him drive away, then immediately called Tom. "He's nervous," she reported, "and he's changing his story about the camera." Meanwhile, Tom had made a bold decision. Under a pseudonym, he posted 2 of the recovered photos online, one of the campsite and one of Lily in the hollow tree, her face slightly blurred to protect her identity. He included a brief description about a missing child case from 1993 and asked if anyone recognized the distinctive hollow tree or the area around it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts began analyzing the images, comparing them to maps of Pinewood Forest. One user, a local hiking guide named Brian Foster, claimed to recognize the area. "There's a section of old-growth forest in the northern part of Pinewood that has trees like this," he wrote in a private message to Tom. "About 3 years ago, I found what looked like an abandoned shelter deep in that section. Always wondered about it." Tom immediately forwarded the information to Detective Wilson, who agreed to organize a search of the area Brian had identified. The next morning, Tom, Roy, and 2 police officers met Brian at a seldom-used trailhead. "It's about 2 miles in," Brian explained as they set off. "Off any marked trails. I only found it because I was tracking deer and got turned around in a storm." The hike was challenging, the path growing less distinct as they ventured deeper into the forest. After nearly 2 hours, Brian stopped and pointed to a dense thicket ahead. "Through there," he said. "It's well hidden." They pushed through the undergrowth and emerged in a small clearing. There, nestled against a rocky outcropping, was a crude shelter built of fallen branches, leaves, and what appeared to be pieces of a backpack. "This is recent," one of the officers commented, examining the structure. "Within the last decade, at least." Tom approached the shelter cautiously, his heart pounding. Could Lily have built this? Could she have survived out here, alone in the wilderness? Inside the shelter, they found faded drawings scratched into the rock wall, childish figures of stick people and trees. And there in one corner was a name scratched in uneven letters. Lily. Tom staggered back, overwhelmed by the evidence that his daughter had been alive for some time after her disappearance. "She was here," he whispered. "She survived." The officers carefully documented and collected evidence from the site, including what appeared to be a child's drawings on pieces of bark and an old tin can used for collecting rainwater. Among the items was a flat stone with crude drawings that seemed to tell a story, a small figure running from a larger one, and a structure that resembled the shelter. As they expanded their search around the shelter, Roy discovered something tucked into a small crevice in the rocks, a weathered composition notebook, its pages warped from years of exposure to the elements. The writing inside was faded but still legible in places. "The man with the smile is looking again. I stay quiet when he comes, run when he sleeps." Tom recognized Lily's handwriting immediately, though it was more uneven than he remembered. The implications were horrifying. Lily hadn't just been lost in the woods. She had been hiding from someone who was actively searching for her. With this new evidence, the police officially reopened Lily's case. Detective Wilson obtained a warrant to search Scott's home and access his records, digging deep into his past. What they found was disturbing. Before Scott had moved to his current town and become a beloved coach, there had been an incident at his previous school, a sealed record from when he was 17, involving allegations from a young female student. The family had moved shortly afterward, and the records had been buried through legal maneuvering by Scott's parents. Tom was furious when he learned this. My parents knew? They covered for him and never said a word? It happens more often than you'd think, Detective Wilson explained grimly. Families protect their own, even when they shouldn't. While the police built their case, Elaine made a discovery of her own. Searching through boxes in her attic, keepsakes she couldn't bear to look at but couldn't throw away, she found a letter Lily had written just days before the camping trip. Tucked inside a coloring book, the childish handwriting made Elaine's blood run cold. Dear Diary, I don't like Uncle Scott. He's weird when nobody's looking. He watches me a lot. I don't want to go camping with him, but Daddy says it will be fun. Elaine brought the letter to the police, adding it to the mounting evidence against Scott. Detective Wilson decided it was time to bring Scott in for questioning. But when officers arrived at Scott's home the next morning, they found it empty. Clothes were missing from his closet, and his car was gone. A neighbor reported seeing him leave with suitcases late the previous night. Scott Clarke had disappeared. He knows we're onto him, Tom said, pacing Detective Wilson's office. He's running because he's guilty. The detective nodded grimly. We've issued an APB for Scott and his vehicle. State police are checking highways and airports. He won't get far. But days passed with no sign of Scott. It was as if he had vanished. Into thin air, just as Lily had 8 years earlier. Tom couldn't sit idle. He began contacting everyone who had ever known Scott, old classmates, former colleagues, distant relatives. Most conversations led nowhere, until he reached James Wilkins, who had roomed with Scott briefly in college. Yeah, Scott was always a bit off, James recalled over the phone. He had this way of talking about things he'd gotten away with. Never specifics, just bragging about how he could talk his way out of anything. Said his family would always back him up no matter what. Did he ever mention any places he'd go if he was in trouble? Tom pressed. Somewhere he felt safe. James thought for a moment. There was this hunting cabin his grandfather left him, up north somewhere. Scott talked about fixing it up someday. Said no one would ever bother him there. This new lead sent Tom and Roy back to the police station. Detective Wilson cross-referenced property records until she found it, a small cabin registered to Scott's grandfather, who had died 15 years ago. The property had been transferred to Scott, but appeared abandoned according to tax records. It's worth checking out, Wilson agreed, organizing a small team to investigate. The cabin was located in a remote area 3 counties over, accessible only by a dirt road that became nearly impassable after rain. As they approached, there were no obvious signs of occupation, no smoke from the chimney, no vehicle visible. Stay back, Detective Wilson instructed Tom and Roy, as she and her officers approached the cabin with weapons drawn. Scott Clarke, police, come out with your hands up. No response came from the cabin. The officers moved in cautiously, clearing each room. The place appeared empty but showed signs of recent habitation, food wrappers, a sleeping bag, and smoldering. Ashes in the fireplace. He was here, Wilson confirmed, probably left when he heard vehicles approaching. Just then, a shout came from outside. One of the officers had spotted movement in the trees behind the cabin. A figure was running through the dense forest, heading for a ravine in the distance. Scott, Tom yelled, breaking away from Roy and sprinting after his brother. The chase led them deeper into the woods, Scott stumbling through underbrush with Tom close behind. Despite 8 years of grief and inactivity, Tom found himself propelled by rage and adrenaline, gaining on his brother with each step. Scott reached the edge of a steep embankment and hesitated, looking for a way down. That moment of indecision was all Tom needed to close the gap. He tackled Scott, both men tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. What did you do to her? Tom demanded, pinning his brother down. What did you do to my daughter? Scott's face was a mask of panic. I didn't kill her, Tom, I swear to God. Officers reached them, pulling Tom off Scott and placing the fugitive in handcuffs. As they led Scott back to the vehicles, he continued to protest his innocence. She ran away from me. That's the truth, Scott insisted, his composure cracking. I got angry because she wouldn't listen. I scared her and she ran. I looked for her, but she was just gone. Then why lie? Tom demanded. Why say she disappeared while taking photos? Scott's shoulders slumped. Because I knew how it would look. Me alone with her after what happened before. Back at the police station, Scott's interrogation revealed the disturbing truth. piece by piece. He admitted to having inappropriate interests in young girls, though he denied ever physically harming Lily. According to Scott, he had taken her hiking with the intention of just spending time with her. But Lily had become uncomfortable with his attention and tried to leave. "I grabbed her arm to stop her," Scott confessed, his voice hollow. "She pulled away, fell down a small embankment. When I climbed down to help her, she was gone. I searched for hours before going back to tell Tom and Elaine." "And the camera?" Detective Wilson pressed. "She had it with her. I assumed she lost it when she fell." The confession aligned with the physical evidence, but still didn't explain the photos taken after Lily's disappearance or the shelter deep in the woods. If Scott was telling the truth and hadn't pursued Lily after she ran, who was the man with the smile she mentioned in her journal? While Scott was being processed on charges of child endangerment, false reporting, and obstruction of justice, the forensics team made a disturbing discovery at the hollow tree site. The partial remains they found, bone fragments that had initially been thought to possibly belong to Lily, were determined to be from a different individual entirely. "The DNA doesn't match Lily or any member of your family," Detective Wilson explained to Tom and Elaine. "We're running it through missing persons databases now." Days later, they had a match. Amber Johnson, a 12-year-old girl who had disappeared while hiking with her family in Pinewood Forest in 1994, a year after Lily vanished. This revelation cast Lily's case in a new light. What if she hadn't been Scott's only victim? What if there was someone else in those woods, someone who had taken both girls? The investigation expanded, with police combing through missing persons reports from the region. They identified 3 more cases of children who had disappeared in or near state parks within a 100-mile radius between 1990 and 1996. Meanwhile, forensic analysts were working to enhance the final photographs from Lily's camera. Using advanced digital techniques, they managed to clarify the blurry third image, the one showing a shadow approaching. In the enhanced version, they discovered something Tom and Roy had missed. Partially visible in the background, behind some bushes, was what appeared to be another child watching. When compared with photos of missing children from that time period, the face matched Amber Johnson. She wasn't alone out there, Tom realized, staring at the enhanced image. Lily and this other girl found each other. The implications were staggering. If Lily had survived for some time in the forest, possibly alongside Amber, what had ultimately happened to them? And if Scott wasn't responsible for their fate, who was? The investigation led police to expand their search area, focusing on regions of the forest that connected the locations where children had disappeared. They discovered additional primitive shelters, suggesting the missing children had formed a small community of survivors, moving their camp periodically. Tom joined the search teams daily, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. If Lily had survived for weeks or even months in these woods, there might be more evidence of her fate, perhaps even proof that she had eventually escaped. His persistence paid off when the team discovered a buried tin box near one of the shelters. Inside were undeveloped film negatives and a child's drawing of what appeared to be a cave, with the word "safe" written beside it. The negatives, when developed, showed multiple children, including Lily and Amber, at various makeshift camps throughout the forest. The final photos were dated nearly 6 months after Lily's disappearance, suggesting she had survived far longer than anyone had imagined possible. As news of these discoveries spread, a former hiker came forward with a troubling account. Brad Newman had been camping in Pinewood Forest in the summer of 1993, several months after Lily went missing. "I heard screams one night," he told detectives. "Not animal sounds, a child screaming. I reported it to the rangers, but they told me it was probably just an owl or a fox. I never felt right about it." Brad's campsite had been near an area known as Cave Trail, a seldom-used path leading to a network of small caves in the northern section of the forest. This aligned with the drawing found in the tin box. Tom, Elaine, and Roy joined the police expedition to Cave Trail. The path was nearly invisible now, reclaimed by nature over the intervening years. They hiked for hours before reaching the cave system, a series of shallow openings in a limestone ridge. "The main cave is just ahead," their guide explained. "It goes back about 30 feet. The smaller ones are mostly just overhangs. As they approached the largest cave opening, Tom felt a strange sense of dread and hope intermingled. Could this place hold the final answers about Lily's fate? Inside, they found clear evidence of long-term habitation, the remains of a fire. Pit, crude tools made from sticks and stones, and most tellingly, names and tally marks scratched into the cave wall. Among them was Lily, with over 100 marks beside it, each potentially representing a day of survival. In a protected alcove at the back of the cave, partially buried under years of sediment, they discovered human remains, small bones that sent a chill through Tom's heart. Forensics would later confirm they belonged to Amber Johnson, but there was something else, a tattered backpack containing a journal with entries in multiple childish handwritings, including Lily's. The final entry, dated nearly 8 months, after her disappearance, read, "A is sick, very sick. The nice man says he'll take me to find help tomorrow. I hope we come back for A soon." Who was the nice man? And what had happened after Lily left the cave? The journal provided no answers, only more questions. As the forensics team carefully excavated the cave site, Detective Wilson approached Tom and Elaine with another development. "We've been running facial recognition on surveillance footage from towns within a 100-mile radius of Pinewood," she explained. Her colleague found something interesting from a bus station in Riverside from 1999. She showed them a grainy security camera image of a teenage girl purchasing a ticket. Though the quality was poor, there was something hauntingly familiar about her features, a resemblance to both Tom and Elaine that couldn't be coincidence. "The ticket was purchased under the name Lee Carter," Wilson continued. "Paid in cash. Destination was Portland, Oregon." Tom stared at the image, hardly daring to hope. "You think it's her? You think Lily survived?" "It's worth investigating," Wilson replied cautiously. "The timing would be right. She'd have been about 14 then." Elaine sat in her hotel room, spreading Lily's childhood drawings across the bed. She had brought them along on this journey to Oregon, hoping they might help identify the woman they were seeking. Each crayon stroke, each childish doodle might hold the key to recognizing her daughter after all these years. The investigation had led them to Portland, where Lee Carter had established a small presence. Records showed she had attended community college briefly before dropping out. There was a rental application from 3 years ago and a business license for a small art studio specializing in nature photography. "She's an artist," Elaine had said when they discovered this, tears welling in her eyes, "just like she always wanted to be." Now Tom and Detective Wilson were following up on an address in a rural community outside Portland, while Elaine waited for news. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "We found her." Tom's voice was thick with emotion. "Elaine, we found Lily." The drive to the small farmhouse felt eternal. When they finally arrived, Elaine saw Tom standing on the porch with a slender woman in her 20s. She had long brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and even from a distance, Elaine recognized her daughter's eyes. The reunion was both beautiful and painful. Lee Carter, who was indeed Lily Clarke, remembered her parents, but her memories were fragmented, some deliberately suppressed. She had built a life for herself, quiet and isolated, focused on her art and photography. Inside her modest home, the walls were covered with haunting forest scenes, many featuring hollow trees, caves, and shadowy figures. Her work had developed a small but devoted following in the local art community, who knew nothing of her past. "Wasn't sure you were still looking for me," Lily said softly as they sat in her living room. "After so long I thought you might have given up." "Never," Tom replied, his voice breaking. "Not for a single day." Over the following days, Lily gradually shared her story. After running from Scott, she had hidden in the forest, using the survival skills her father had taught her during previous camping trips. She'd found the hollow tree and stayed there, venturing out only for water and berries. "I was terrified he would find me," she explained. "I kept taking pictures because I thought if something happened to me, someone might find the camera someday and know the truth." Weeks into her ordeal, she had encountered Amber, another girl hiding in the woods. Together they had formed a bond, building shelters and helping each other survive. There were others too for a while, Lily revealed. Children who were lost or Running from someone, we looked after each other, but survival had grown harder as winter approached. Amber had fallen ill, and Lily had been desperate to find help. That's when they encountered a hiker, a man, Lily, described only as the forest ranger who wasn't a ranger. He offered to take me to town, to get help for Amber. Lily's voice grew distant as she recalled the memory. But when we got to his truck, I saw things, pictures of children. I knew something was wrong. Lily had managed to escape from this man and flee deeper into the wilderness. She never saw Amber again. For years, she had survived on her own, occasionally venturing to the edges of small towns to scavenge supplies. Fear kept her from seeking help, fear of Scott, fear of the fake ranger, fear that no one would believe her story. Eventually, an elderly couple had found her half-starved near their rural property. They had taken her in, asking few questions about her past. They called her Lee after their own daughter who had died years earlier, and Lily, traumatized and desperate for safety, had accepted the name and the shelter they offered. After the couple passed away, she had used their modest savings to forge a new identity and build a quiet life, always looking over her shoulder, always ready to run again. DNA testing confirmed Lily's identity beyond any doubt. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. The miraculous return of a child missing for 8 years captured national attention, with reporters camping outside Lily's farmhouse and Tom and Elaine's hotels. Meanwhile, the investigation into the fake ranger led to a disturbing revelation. Cross-referencing descriptions from Lily with employment records and other missing children cases, detectives identified Harold Mercer, a former park maintenance worker who had been fired shortly before Lily's disappearance for inappropriate behavior. Mercer had died in prison in 2000 while serving time for unrelated child endangerment charges. Evidence suggested Mercer had been connected to at least 3 other child disappearances in national parks across the state. The discovery of Amber's remains in the cave and Lily's testimony provided closure for the Johnson family after 7 years of uncertainty. As for Scott, he cooperated fully with investigators following his arrest. While he maintained he never physically harmed Lily, he admitted to inappropriate behavior and to lying about the circumstances of her disappearance. His confession, combined with evidence of prior incidents, resulted in a 15-year sentence for child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and perjury. For Tom, Elaine, and Lily, the process of healing had just begun. Lily agreed to return to her hometown briefly to see the place where her journey had started. Standing at the edge of Pinewood Forest, camera in hand, a professional one now, not a disposable, she faced her past with her parents beside her. "I never stopped looking for you," Tom said softly. "Every day for 8 years." "I know," Lily replied. "Sometimes I thought I felt you searching." "On the worst nights, that kept me going." Elaine touched her daughter's face gently. "Can you ever forgive me? For not seeing the signs about Scott? For not believing Tom all these years?" Lily's eyes, so much older than her years, softened with compassion. "There's nothing to forgive. We all did what we thought was right at the time." In the months that followed, Lily began the difficult process of reclaiming her identity. She decided to keep Lee as her first name, but reclaimed Clarke as her surname, a bridge between her past and the life she had built for herself. Her artwork gained new attention, now understood as the expression of her incredible survival story. She published a memoir titled The Camera I Buried, which became an instant bestseller and helped other families of missing children maintain hope. Tom and Elaine, though still divorced, found a new understanding through their shared joy in Lily's return and their common purpose in helping her heal. The guilt they had carried for 8 years gradually eased as they watched their daughter rebuild her life on her own terms. On the anniversary of her return, Lily Clarke opened a gallery show featuring photographs taken in Pinewood Forest, not images of fear and hiding, but of beauty, resilience, and light filtering through the trees. Among the photographs was a single image from her original disposable camera, the picture of the hollow tree that had sheltered her on that first terrifying night. Beneath it was a simple caption: "Sometimes the things we bury are meant to be found What would you risk to uncover a truth that everyone else has buried? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more psychological thrillers that will make you question everything you thought you knew.